So it's so nice to meet you, Razan. I watched a Stone's Throw a few days ago, and I was really excited about it, especially for me as someone who studies digital art as a PhD student also at Stanford. So I just wanted to start off with just talking about the film. I understand that this is about your father. Was this a project that you've been thinking about for a while, or was this a way for you to get closer to him?
Yeah, the film, like all my films, really like start with a necessity. Um, and for the longest time, growing up, uh, this island that my dad would disappear to uh, had some kind of like mythical status in our household because we did not really flesh out the material conditions in which my dad and all of his fellow laborers were working in on the island. Being here also in Jahjage on Turtle Island, in the city of Montreal, also like it's unlike the Zionist entity that has been there for only 70 years. This has been 150 years in the making. Canada as a settler state, so and uh, like a big part of the material infrastructure of the settler state was not just the displacement of the different indigenous tribes from their lands, but also in this dark historical twist to kind of extract their labor and the extraction of resources from the land. So you don't just push them out of their land, but you change their relationship to their own land into an extractive one. And it clicked for me that it's not just that my dad's condition or labor conditions on in the extraction of oil in the Arab Gulf as kind of a colonial continuum from British Petroleum and British colonialism in the region is a collective one. It's not just a personal story, but rather also um, like colonization is a story that is the condition of many indigenous peoples around the world.
Hmm.
So it was kind of triple importance for me. One was personal, because I really needed this place to not be mythical, to be. I needed to understand it. I need to understand where my dad was going, what are the labor conditions that he was working in. One was political and relevant to Palestine and the occupation of Palestine and how that relates to the petrodollar economy of the region, which was, stolen and in very close relation to British colonization and its continuation today in the form of the Zionist colonization of Palestine. And then finally, this gave me more insight into the more advanced settler states that I also today I'm a guest in. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and then thinking about how does the digital really configure into your work as like this third space? Could you talk to me a little bit more about that? Yeah.
Yeah, when I started recording Zoom interviews with my dad, because was during the pandemic, the funny story is that when once I realized that I was making a film about this, I told him, Baba, I think this is gonna be a film. And he said, no, no, don't bother, the island is off limits for the camera. So you can't really film there, so you can't really make a film. And I was like, Baba, come on, like you haven't seen my films. Like I'm kind of like I make work especially in places that are inaccessible. Um, in Palestine because I'm unable to return as a third generation displaced Palestinian refugee, but also in this case, in this securitized um, uh, oil facility um, that, I can't even call it private property. It's a work camp. It's securitized, it's militarized,
Mm.
so um, yeah, it's uh, it's an extension of the nation state, in this case of the UAE. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. It reminded me of this film that I saw recently. It was What Did You Dream of? Parajanov by Faraz Fisharaki. He's like an
Mm,
Iranian filmmaker based in Berlin, and he was using
hmm.
these Zoom recordings during the pandemic to connect with his family and to eventually and to think about this third space in which they can live.
Yeah, and to kind of push my response a bit further, the digital doesn't just allow us access into these places that are inaccessible to our bodies and our cameras, but rather, yes, it is a space in it of itself and is an extension of these physical spaces and their material conditions, and they reinforce these spaces in their current status quo material conditions. So, for example, on this island, the Google Earth imagery doesn't just give me access to kind of visualize the island, but rather, um, like reinforces the disappearance, the invisibilization of laboring bodies on the island. So you can see the infrastructure, you can see, the land captured as a 360 image, which in it of itself as a material aesthetic erases so much of what happens on that island. Um, and so it doesn't just give me access to the space, but rather in this movement in which I'm accessing that space, I'm also rupturing that access uh, by being confronted by this aesthetic that is uh, you know uh, visualizing some of those material conditions, which is, oh, we don't have any people here.
Mm.
We're producing so much oil, but it has not,
Right.
like, we can't really trace it back to the labor, and this is actually reiterated twofold in the film, in these two found like two found videos that I found online, produced by the corporation itself, by Zadko, and the other one by Gasco, but they're extensions of each other. Um, uh, yeah, this invisibilization of labor and labor conditions. One was a documentary that talks about how this oil company is is preserving nature on the island, and the other one is a safety video. In the first one, we don't see any laborers. We only see, the kind of environmental professionals and animals and plants, and so it becomes kind of also a form of greenwashing, where the image, again, like this beautiful natural image of sustainability, is hiding actual labor relations, because the moment you talk about labor, you have to talk about land. The moment you talk about land, you have to talk about extraction.
Mm.
And so these images are I mean, they're weaponized, whether it's the Google Earth image or this nature preservation video, or finally the work safety video that has a totally different story. I can get into it, but that has that was definitely created to completely erase the death, actually, of three laborers through SO2 intoxication. I was shocked to hear, and not so surprised, shocked and not so surprised to hear that it was produced right after they died, because of course we individualize and turn this this death into almost like the video is saying, like, it's your fault that you died because you
Mhm.
didn't follow instructions, right?
Right.
And so it again becomes, and we see these 3D animated aesthetics where there are no real people,
Mhm.
because once you show real people, then you have to see real bodies, and I think this form of abstraction into the 3D digital image that you are talking about is definitely kind of a weaponization of the abstraction of this medium. And it's not, if you dig a little bit into the modes of production of these aesthetics, they are forms of extraction in themselves, and they are a form of death in themselves. So, so yeah, this is all to say that it's definitely a third space in that way, but also then with to go full circle, when we bring in the voice of Amin and his experience and the voices of the laborers and their Google reviews, the texts from Ghassan Kanafani, the laborers of Haifa in 1936, the existentialist poem by Philip Schmidt. When we bring with the voices of the people who are voicing these texts as well, when we bring in all of these ghosts into into this like pristine digital image, we break it, right? And we break that kind of abstraction which is solidified by this high production, highly like uh, digitized image, abstracted image. And we see it as a texture. I even zoom in onto it just to remind us that this is a material, and it was made to hide relations in general, to people, to land, to oil, to nature, where my dead ones rise from the dead, right? Like, this is what finally the kind of the algorithm comes up with in the text. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like bringing the specters into the spectacle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I, there's so many things I could ask, and there's so many things I want to talk to you about. But in the purposes of the interview, I'll just continue to my next question, which I mean, I think your video really recalls. Well, I've been reading Ariella Aisha Zule's Potential
Mm.
Histories,
Yeah.
and my project, I guess, is also thinking about archives and relation to 3D generated imagery, which is partially why your video for me was so important. And I think it's really interesting. I'm interested to hear, I guess, your take on thinking about this project in relation to archives and reaccessing the archive, but also realizing
Mm.
the archive itself has its limitations in the way that you just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, another story that's important for this is, not it's not that the digital image is, the way I'm describing it basically is that it functions as a wall, right? So we think that we are trespassing the colonial border, or the fenced work camp through the digital image, but then the digital image like is a wall in it of itself, right? And so you, like,
Interface.
it's, yeah, exactly. And so it becomes like you think you're trespassing, but you're actually um in struggle with the border once you're in the image, and an extension of that border, right? um So, in the same vein, the archive is an extension of the colonial border, and I'll tell you the story is that British Petroleum has a whole book archiving the labor of Iraqis all the way to uh, Palestine, all the way to Palestinian laborers building this pipeline from Kirkuk to Haifa.
Mhm.
And it's this thick, the book. It's this
Mhm.
thick, okay? Um, the images start in Kirkuk and end, disappear at the border of Palestine.
Mhm.
Suddenly, we have no images of these Palestinian laborers. Why? Because they didn't just divest their labor, they actually dropped their hammers and sabotaged the pipeline because they understood that this is not economic infrastructure. This is military infrastructure.
Right.
This is infrastructure that is يعني literally the British trained Zionist militias to protect the pipeline, and these Zionist militias then became terrorist groups that terrorized and genocided Palestinians in 1948, and then became the nucleus for the IDF,
Mm.
so-called the IDF,
Yeah.
right? Yes, of course, the archive then is going to erase them, just like these terrorist groups erase them on the ground.
Mm. And your
Um,
first video references this event, I think, right? Or it's like 100 days in Nakba, I think. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, your father was born 100 years old, and so was the Nakba.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly, speaks to 1948 and really like delves into um, the image, the digital image that is both kind of a capture of that place that I don't have access to, that I'm now able to visit, and the wall that erases my grandmother and her history of being displaced from that place, which of course for the digital image becomes a geolocation, becomes a commodity, a real estate tool, a tourism tool, you know, all the ways that we use Google Street View,
Hmm.
that renders the land not a place that we live in, but a place that we consume. And
Hmm.
this is what colonization is all about, right? And so, yes, I truly find both in the digital image and in the same vein in the archival image a site to examine how colonization functions and to struggle with that.
Mm.
Um, in the aesthetic field, of course, I'm not in Gaza resisting. I'm not in the West Bank in the camps resisting. I'm making films, yani, to be very grounded about it. But this is it, you know. If you're gonna make films, this is I think this is where it's at, you know, for me.
Mm. And do you see your work as if it was contributing to an archive that is not accessible? Or would you not use it?
Yeah,
Would you call it more documentary, or how would you frame your work?
yeah. I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day. I'll tell you the story again. That I was being interviewed about the film, and one of the very passionate students who was in the audience asked, it's a terrible question and right, a spot on question. No, how come the Zionist entity, the Israelis, are able, have had this historical and in a continuum, all settler colonial states and colonizing powers have it as a political and military policy to erase the archive,
Hmm.
like the Israelis when they entered Beirut, when they occupied Beirut in 1982, the first thing they did is burn the Palestinian archive.
Right.
Today in Gaza, one of the main targets, besides everything else that is being annihilated, but early in the genocide, one of the first targets was the municipal building that has all of the archives of Gaza,
Mm-hmm.
um, or part of the archives, at least. Um, so how come a state that is so built on the erasing of archives today is producing this infinite amount of images of their own violence?
Hmm.
How can they do that? Like how is it? How is this it's both systematic invisibilizing and a systematic hyper visibilizing.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's fucking terrifying.
Right. Yeah.
because I see in that, like the biggest psyop and today is a psychological operation is for us to for them to be able to produce all of these violent images, and yet there is and after 2 years of genocide there's no political change because these images and the way that we consume them depoliticizes even the most horrible violences,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but still, they will burn the archive because what they're doing is, and this is where the conversation with my friend came in. It was key because I was also like talking and trying to think through this, and then I thought through this with my friend, and she said, yeah, exactly. They're burning the archive and they're replacing it with these images,
Mm.
both of Israel as the destination, the postcard, the beautiful place, and the military power, the military might, this image that was broken open the moment the Palestinian resistance broke open their siege, their 20-year-old siege. This is what this is. What this is the um, this is this is why the this brutal fight is happening both on the ground and on the level of images. This is what's at stake.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and of course, my films here come to resist that in twofold. One, by reappropriating the archive, um, both because يعني, these images that are captured of Haifa, for example, where my grandmother was born, they claim it as an occupied city, Israeli city. But for us, this is our land that was stolen from us.
Mm.
So yes, I'm reclaiming that image that has been captured, just like the city was captured, its image was captured, and I'm reclaiming that.
Mm.
And to speak to Azulai as well, and capture and colonial capture, right?
Right.
The imperial charter.
Right.
But also like I think formally speaking, the long form of cinema and the
Mhm.
way we distribute films is so key because we can't just consume images. We can't just sit and look at our phone. We can't. It's part of the death machine. And for me, it's important to do these films, but it's also really important in the city to be organizing with a film collective called Regai Palestinian, where we organize film screenings and we sit down together in a room. We watch a film, one thing together for a while,
Mm.
and then we talk about it,
Mm.
and then we activate.
Mm.
It becomes a way to deepen our awareness so that when we are fighting we know what we're fighting and
Mhm.
what we're fighting for,
Mhm.
because here is an extension of there, and the violence is a continuum. This colonial violence is a continuum. Yeah, this is how I frame my work.
And I think it's really exciting too, the way that the film thinks about its own processuality and bringing
Mm,
up all the coding and how all the script is written as if it's in code. But then there are human voices that come
mm,
through rather than like
mm,
robotic sort of voices. And I'm thinking about this in contrast to like the work of John Raffman, for example, whose early
mhm,
does do a lot of Google Maps, but he kind of just totally like I think abandons himself to the third space of like the digital realm in this very post-internet techno-optimist era. So if you could
mm,
just talk a little bit more perhaps about the coding aspects, the processuality, and I think this goes into this longer conversation about thinking about continuum and the archive, right?
mhm. Yeah. Good. Um, where to start? I mean, to me, the
Yeah.
place to start is the modes of production. Like, how are these images, digital images, produced?
Hmm.
You have a Google car that is
Right.
trotting the cities of the global north. So first
Right.
of all, Israel is part of the global north. Okay? It's an extension of the West, and that's how we know it's a colony. One of the ways that you can know that Israel is a colony is through the fact that it is mapped by the Google car.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing that comes into play here is these cities then that are occupied then are captured in these kind of like 360 captures of what becomes a geolocation.
Mhm.
And this it's like a hungry eye, right? Like I kind of
The nine
speak to
eyes.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I think sometimes they call it nine eyes because it's nine different cameras.
Oh, nine eyes, nine hungry eyes.
Yeah.
Like never satiated eyes because it just wants to kind of datify place into a flat image, which literally kind of in its hyper realism, in its high production, in its kind of in our legibility as well, and how we consume reality today, mediated through these images. So it's a kind of a loop, machinic loop. Um, it renders relation to the land as a commodity.
Mhm.
يعني it's an extension of how capitalism works vis-a-vis the land. And in these very extractive ways, we can talk about Google and server space and how much we can delve into dig more deeper and deeper into modes of production.
Mhm.
But I think this is where it starts for me at any point when I make a film, to kind of go back to your first question. I
Mhm.
know there's always a personal question, but also I'm always afraid of making work.
Mhm.
I'm very careful in
Mhm.
making an image. The sanctity of the image is
Mhm.
completely weaponized
Mhm.
today.
Mhm.
The image is no longer a spirit, it's a wall.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
there's So for me, it's a crime, يعني, to engage in that third space in its purity. It's complicity.
Mhm.
It's complicity in the erasure,
Mhm.
because then you're aestheticizing the erasure and you are deepening this legibility of this
Mhm.
place as this empty place. Because how was Canada colonized? How was Palestine colonized? Canada had painters painting Canada as landscapes empty of people.
Mhm.
Palestine was captured by the imperial shutter. This is why يعني, Azulai talks about colonization uh, as sorry, the history of photography starting with colonization and not the other way around.
Right.
because because exactly it's the idea that we are that colonial powers are able to render to erase people and land and the relationship between people and land using images
Mhm.
images that turn Turtle Island into landscapes ready for colonization, encouraging movement towards the west coast. I'm sure somehow it's the same in the US. I don't have depth of history. And in Palestine, sending missionaries with cameras to capture Palestine as the Holy Land, this idyllic European Holy Land, not the land of Jesus, who was born in Palestine and whose descendants live in Palestine. No, they're the European Christians that
Yeah. Yeah.
coming through the Vatican back and creating this imaginary of the Holy Land through these images. And so I think this post-internet, let me not go aggressive on it, but this is
Yeah,
it. It's doing the exact same thing. It's engaging in the erasure of land and people and the relationship between the two. And today, the erasure of the extraction based on which these digital images are made to begin with.
right. Yeah, and we're seeing this argument come up a lot more nowadays, even in Silicon Valley, where everything is super aestheticized, and the techno-optimism is everywhere here, um, of this idea of thinking about extraction in relation to AI, right? Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on that in relation to your work?
Yeah, I mean, AI is the acceleration of what I was just talking about.
Right.
Of course, they want to, with every new technology, what does the colonizer do? He obscures,
Mhm.
right? Oh, AI, the latest in,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And people feel both over excitement and over fear, right?
Yeah.
Instead of a grounded understanding of how these things work.
Yeah, I think Wendy Chun talks about it in her earlier book in 2011, where she's like t thinking about all of the obscurity that comes with the black box of the machine.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, in I hope that in my films that I'm able to kind of tackle all of these layers,
Yeah.
speaking not just reinserting our histories into the land and our bodies but rather doing that vis-a-vis like a struggling with the structure itself, which in the film is happening on the aesthetic level
Yeah,
and
like with
on the ground.
like the coding dialogue thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see it in everything, in all the images, in every decision. I mean, it's not just a decision, it's kind of a collaborative circle of relations that like makes up the film. But yes, like the most kind of like prominent way, if we want to speak specifically to kind of um, like obscurity and digital languages and all of that, like yeah, kind of bringing back spirit to that too, right? Um, and voice and conversation, like these voices are repeating what this very small Python script did. I mean, the Python script is a very simple one. Just to ground it again, I like grounding things. The Python script, what it did is I had three texts. One is the Google reviews of laborers who actually like worked on the island. It's, for me, it was so interesting to see people trying to like compress their experience and the labor relations and everything that Amine talks about in like the form of the Google review.
Out of 5 stars.
5 stars, 4 stars. I mean, exactly. And kind of that for me constituted kind of like the capitalist promise, the text of the capitalist promise. Um, and then, the second text was the text of Ghassan Kanafani, Revolution in Palestine, 1936-1939, which is a materialist analysis of the revolt in which the Palestinian oil laborers decide to, divest their labor and sabotage the pipeline. It was um, part of that revolt, and then finally the third text was an existentialist idea, like a text poem by German idealist George Philip Schmidt. So there where you are not. And the algorithm, the Python script is very simple. It's actually just asking the 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 script is asking kind of a scissors to cut through the text at a differential slope. and then sticking to, so if I'm cutting here and then I'm cutting the other text and then I'm gluing them together, I create some kind of form of a new sentence, and then I do that again and again and again and again, and I kind of formulate these like almost like a braid of these three texts together, right? If we think about it. So uh, it was important for me to show these things, and at least, in a film you can't show everything. It's also about the tension of like what you show and what you don't show, and the limitation of time, and there's something about also the unknown, right? So that is important for spirit again. So yeah, I think that like I wanted to at least um visibilize like what is happening, and even like I try to make it clear and how the voices then kind of turn into like they start as a set of voices, then another set of voices, and then they become a call and response, to kind of also make that process clearer, because it is a call and response when you're bringing them together. The two texts are kind of speaking to each other. And so yeah, I mean, this is all in the hope that like, to bring the to bring this code and these images to life, right? Because every aspect of the machine is trying to render people dead, trying to
Mm.
burn the land and render the land dead, and even render images dead.
Mm. Yeah, I guess the machine doesn't really see the image in the same way as we do, as UC Parika says about operational images and Hito Steyerl and Trevor Paglen, right? Yeah, it just converts it all into data and abstraction at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, no, I really appreciate your work. Let me just ask you one more, maybe two more questions if you have time. Um,
Yeah, of course.
so in this context of thinking about visibility and invisibility and um, hypervisibilization. Recently in the US, we've had like this hypervisibilization of Palestinian cinema, like no other land winning the Oscars, for example. Um, yeah, what is your take?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if no other land is Palestinian cinema.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's an Israeli. Yeah.
I mean, speaking to form, like just from the form of the acceptance speech, we know that, we need to contextualize everything. And in the context of that speech, we know that the colonizer and the colonized, like, seeps into how this film was made, right? And this desperate attempt from Hollywood to really uh, 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 like and further entrench this uh, like criminal framework of a two-sided conflict,
Mhm.
a war between two equal sides. Um, and the settler state being uh, the nature of things, the reference, the layer where history begins, where the image
Right.
begins.
Mhm.
Um, this does not deny the resistance that is happening in Masafer Yatta
Right.
against the colonizer, and Basil and his family. And but I'm speaking to exactly what your question. What about the hypervisibility of Palestinian cinema? It's all about how we receive this image. Do we receive it in community? Do we receive it in action? Do we receive it in struggle? Do we receive it in PACB in the Palestinian academic and cultural boycott of Israel. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, the question also is CAAMFest has CAAMFest signed on to PACB? I mean, this is my responsibility to
Mm.
ask. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, a lot of food for thought. I guess my last question is, what is your next project?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in a place to be producing work at the moment. Yeah.
Teaching and
I mean, there's a genocide going on. Like, there's no space for me to be thinking about like a project, like yeah. In the same vein, I just, I was being told about this wonderful interview that was done with Muhammad al-Kurd, who was asked that this very question, like, how did you write Perfect Victims,
Mm.
during the genocide? And my friend is telling me, I haven't heard the interview yet. Like he says that, he said, it's out of arrogance,
Mm.
that out of spite. Like, yes, there's an ongoing genocide, and we're gonna keep going, and we're gonna radicalize each other. And indeed, like, this book is really for people who are engaged in the struggle. Um, so yeah, I mean, this film, A Stone's Throw, has definitely kept me going, as kind of one of different sites of resistance, and like distributing it in this um, conscious way that is engaging with um, community festivals, festivals with a critical understanding of the occupation of Palestine, festivals that and venues that have signed on to PACB. I mean, this is where the the artist's responsibility then becomes to make sure that um, his or her or their image is not turned and flattened into representation.
Co-opted, tokenized.
Yeah, and like, representation. I mean, we need to really be rethinking representation, and it really needs to. It is the moment where, like, we really need to anchor it in an understanding, a deep critical understanding of modes of production. Otherwise, we will keep seeing Palestinian cinema and Palestinian death and not be able to engage in actual politics,
Mm.
um, and actual organizing against
Mm.
this death machine.
Great.
Um,
Well, thank you so much. Let me stop the